Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of our Truthful Telling Tuesday.
Absolutely. Shamim and I are back, and as you maybe heard there, we have made the decision to reframe and use a slightly different narrative with the rather than it being truth telling Tuesday. We really jumped on a kind of trend there. The kind of hashtag truth telling became a thing during the summer, and we jumped on it, but on reflection and having taken, it was actually inspired by Liam Kavanagh from the Moderate Flank. We had a wonderful conversation, and he just kind of casually said, "I actually prefer the term truthful rather than truth telling, because it's less forceful, it's more inviting." And that really resonated with me, and yeah, we have decided that rather than truth telling Tuesdays, it'll be our truthful Tuesdays. So we hope you like the rebrand, the reframing. But yeah, Shamim and I, we are back. It has been an absolute roller coaster since the last time that we have spoken to you guys through a truthful Tuesday. And Shamim has been to COP, is still recovering from COP27, shall we say. But today's Truthful Tuesday is really an honest, heartfelt um, reflection on COP27. And so, Shamim, you were there. Do you want to just like summarize your experience of being at COP27?
Thank you. I can say being at COP27 was more of it was great. It was good. It was more of a frustration. It was a good having a good time with other young people, and it was also generally it was both, and it impacted me a lot, especially being an environmental activist and being a social scientist and all that is happening around our communities and the villages and everything. So that really inspired me. It was an inspiration, it was a frustration, it was because nothing is normally perfect, everything is just perfectly imperfect. And that is how I viewed COP27. And despite the fact that we all went there with so much expectations and it being branded as the COP of Africa and seeing so many Africans, by the way, at COP it was something really, really inspiring and really great, though not from my country, but from other countries, just seeing them there and working with them and talking to them, having conversations, and even meeting people that I was just talking to online on phone. Like it was just really a great experience, and just giving them that big hug and say, "Look at you, you're finally here." It was really, really a really nice experience on that matter, and yeah.
Oh, that's so good to hear that, like, it sounds like overall, like you had a positive experience of COP. And as I've said to you and many other young activists who we're speaking with during COP27, is that it's an intense, like, my experience of COP26 here in Glasgow,
Very intense.
it's like possibly the most intense 2 weeks that I've experienced. And so, like, you're consuming so much information, like meeting amazing people. Like it sparks so many ideas, and like, yeah, the time on the ground, those kind of 2 weeks of COP were themselves really, really intense. And it takes and intense in good and bad ways. Like all of your feelings and emotions like seem heightened. It's like when you meet somebody, like you're meeting so many people, as you say, that are on the same wavelength as you, that are working towards improving um our climate action and saving our species. And so you kind of really have that kind of compounded joy of like more and more people, you're like that kind of not feeling alone in this climate space is brilliant, and it's a really nice reminder, and there's a really really strong energy of togetherness with other fellow activists that you meet there, but there's also an awful lot of greenwashing. There's just like just it is overwhelming. There was just so much happening. And I would say, like I've told you before and said to others, honestly, it probably takes 6 to 9 months to really process like your experience of COP. So this is like your initial reflections, like your immediate, like, you've been home, you've kind of rested, not really. You've been out and doing a lot of outreach with like schools and university groups, sharing your experience of COP with others across your country in Tanzania, and it's been amazing to see that. And so yeah, this is your initial reflection. um and it will, like, there'll be so much that comes, and so it'll be good to come back maybe in 6 months and have another conversation about how you felt and perceived COP27. But I hope you don't mind me like asking as well, like I really love that you have framed this and shared it as a positive experience. But when we were able to catch up, like you and I, during your time at COP, like quite often, there were times when you were in tears, or there was so much that was like frustrating. And so that I'm really, really glad that and yours, I've heard so many other like young activists who I kind of am friends with and work with saying the same thing, that on like every day was a roller coaster. You had like moments of like joy, but then almost every day you were crying at something, or there was like something that was frustrating and angering. So yeah, maybe that kind of balanced view. What was it that was making you cry or making you angry and frustrated there?
Yeah, and as I think I shared initially with you that, as you said, COP is always very intense, and if you're not like mentally well, it might ruin your mental health. So you just have to be prepared, and of course have people to talk to. Yeah, that is something that I also realized while at COP. At least have people to to tell them how you feel, how are you feeling about COP, what are your feelings, and why are you feeling that way. If such kind of people are going to help you eliminate that kind of fear and that kind of going into depression, because it might just turn out into depression and a mental crisis if you do not have people to talk to about that. And to me it was more of like okay, looking at these all these world leaders gathered and everything. And I remember there was this video that we watched during the when all the presidents were just like checking in, and there was this video that we all watched together. And it was showing how the continent, or the planet has been affected by climate change. All the droughts in Alexander, all the droughts in Nigeria, Pakistan, a third of Pakistan underwater. And that really really frustrated me, because there's no way you as the world leaders who have the solution, who have the resources to provide the solution, have the energy and the vibe to come and sit down and show us the problem that a third of Pakistan is underwater, but still you have the energy to talk about it. It's high time we took action. It's underwater. So what? What is the next step? And that is one of the greatest like frustrations that I got, that people are just taking things like business as usual. Like, okay, a third of Pakistan is underwater, people, so let us show you how a third of Pakistan is underwater. Let us show you how Nigeria is facing floods. Let us show you Alexander. Let us show you the northern parts of Kenya, how people are dying of hunger and everything. So it's like business as usual, but what is the concrete solution to all these problems that are happening? And then another like mega frustration. I call it a mega frustration, and sometimes I remember that part. I normally just laugh because I can't do anything. there was this, we were doing this kind of demonstration, talking about 1.5 to stay alive. And we did it with some doctors as well, talking about their patients dying because of their respiratory diseases that are being caused by emissions and plastics and everything. So there was this one guy, I'm just not going to mention the country, and he came, he was a delegate, a party delegate, because a party delegate, they can negotiate and bring like make a decision on the table. And he really asked me like, what is 1.5? And I was like, wow. Yeah, that really, it's, at first I thought maybe I didn't hear him, and I asked, sorry, what did you say, sir? He was like, oh, I was asking what is 1.5, and I'm like, and you remember, even one of my friends
Yeah.
told me like, tell him 1.5 is it's money, it's the money that we need from them. And I was like, no, 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 I'm not gonna do that. So this showed me how, like, how our governments are not careful to what kind of people that they are selecting as delegates to go to those rooms and negotiate and make decisions on the country's behalf. Because looking at that person, and you like, this is a person who is carrying that country in their hands, and how do they even not understand or know what 1.5 is? And that is also like a situation that really, really frustrated me, and at the same time it made me realize that I'm kind of like, we as young people, we have the power, we have the energy, we have the knowledge, we have the skills, and we understand everything. And it's just not like, who do you know to get into what you need to get to? And then again, another frustration was just, I was expecting a lot of calls, and majorly on loss and damage finance, adaptation, biodiversity. I had so much expectations on that, and that is mainly the angle that I was really protesting on, like biodiversity, loss and damage, and then human rights. By the way, that was also another thing that I did, and also on vegan issues, and the planet. That is more of biodiversity, protecting biodiversity. So it was more of like an intense thing where you just sit and question yourself. Okay, I have done this protest, I have had all these conversations with all these wonderful people, but what is the next step? And by the way, if I never told you, I at COP, and I think up to now I was just suffering from or experiencing climate anxiety. I was so much overwhelmed with everything, and I remember even the last day when I was on that plane, I was just looking outside the window and looking at Egypt, and I was just like crying, and I'm like, okay, after COP, then what next? What is the next step? Is it COP28, or what is the next step when it comes to actions? And and that was just something that I was like, I cannot do anything, I cannot change it, it is just the system. But still, as a young person, I have to stand out and say, we need to change the system, we need to understand how to do all these things. And it's just that also, governments and leaders, whenever they send people to COP, they should have just a strategy and know how to how they are going to, give out their problems, and then what is to be done next. We have to push, because we are having right now the loss and damage finance funding facility. But when is it going to start to operate? Where is that money coming from? Despite the fact that the EU has already committed to do to give out over 60 million euros for loss and damage. But what are the others doing about the same? What are we doing about that? So it was more of like, yeah, it is an experience that I can never forget all my life as an activist. I would just, yeah, remember it all my life. And going to these rooms, questioning those leaders, seeing them dozing, that was another thing. seeing them dozing, and you're like, I wish I had the chance to speak. You cannot bring these people who are just sleeping here to speak on our behalf, to speak on behalf of the country. We didn't come here to sleep. You're carrying a country in your hands, a country of even more than 300 million people in your hands, and you have the energy to just doze around and even just yeah. So it was what it was, and yeah.
Oh no, and you know what, that's really you highlight something. So I made a couple of notes of kind of questions that you gave us so much there, like so much. Um, but the going in chronological order, the people like sleeping, like these people that are due to, like, they're meant to be representing, like they have that they're there as negotiators. Likelihood is that they are getting paid to be there. Whereas, when you and
Yeah.
I have done COP, or when we do all of our work, generally we're not getting paid to do it. Like, and so when you see people getting paid, like sleeping on the job, not understanding what 1.5 is, like, how on earth are you at COP if you do not like, if yeah,
How
that's
did you even get
mind
here?
blowing. Like, but like something that you touched upon, and we'll come back to 1.5 because I think there's a really strong message in that kind of the outcomes and everything that was discussed at COP25. COP27 around 1.5. Sorry, the oh, sorry, what? Oh, she's on Zoom. Oh, sorry. I said to her to message me and say uh I'm like literally in the middle of this. I thought I'd get noticed. Tell her that I just need another like half hour to wrap up, if that's okay. If she can't join, that's fine. Like, sorry, I just got like interrupted there. So yeah, I hate that. That was the most inconvenient timing. Um, yeah, so you had mentioned, we'll come back to 1.5, I think, because there's really a lot to unpack there. But you mentioned also about like the governments, like if you're sending a party or you have the negotiators, like at least having a strategy, a plan. I mean, like from what I observed, seeing COP27 from afar, being here in Glasgow, you know, I was just so mortified and disappointed by our government, the UK government. There was headlines that, well, for a start, Rishi wasn't even going to show up. And then some of the headlines, it was just a big spin game. It was all talk and no action because they talked about mobilizing 300 million that had been promised years and years ago, like probably 5 COPs back, like money that was promised in climate reparations and stuff like this. And the UK were being called out ahead of COP27 to say, well, where is this money that you promised? Like, why should you kind of be attending or have like a speech when you can't even like match your actions don't match your words. And so like, there is also a lot of greenwashing and tokenism, like, just saying a speech for the sake of it, even if there is nothing behind it. And so yeah, like one of the things that it was really lovely that you touched upon, one of the nice things was to see so many like Africans at COP. And this was heralded as the kind of COP of Africa. We can come on to talk a little bit more about whether you felt that was like representative, whether, how that was perceived and felt both at COP and from the kind of external perspective. But in terms of like, you highlighted you were there as an observer, right? You said about the kind of, there was the negotiators and people who were sleeping. Like they're the people that have power to like do anything at COP. Like as an observer, you get to see what is happening. You maybe are invited to speak at some kind of panels or yeah, like in terms of there was a lot of Africans there. Would you say that there was a good split? Like, was that representative in the negotiating tables as well? Or was it more kind of invited to, like, was it tokenistic essentially? Like, were your voices heard? Were your voices respected at this COP?
I can say, first of all, I'm just so happy and like very grateful to my country, Tanzania, one of the best countries that I can never choose any other country to be in or to be born in rather than my own country, Tanzania. Is that I was given an overflow party, and being given an overflow party means I can go into any room, and and that is how I got to observe all everything that was going on. And if I was on an observer basis, it means it limited me. But they gave me this badge that gave me the the power to step in any room and speak to anybody and they listen to me. And though I'm not in the decision making tables, but at least I could step in rooms and listen and just listen and come up with but not to contribute.
Sorry, that was my mistake. Yeah, like
Yeah,
there is again a difference. Observer, like you actually have limitations of where you can go.
exactly.
But yeah, you had full access. But yeah, forgive me if I'm wrong. Like, were you part of any of the kind of negotiation, like to contribute to negotiations or just observe?
So basically, it's we have party and then party delegates. These are people who can they negotiate and they get involved in decision making. And then overflow party. These are the people that the UNFCCC says we need maybe the government of Tanzania is going to bring this number of people, and then there are those for negotiations, but then there are those that are added on top. So we need an overflow, and that is why they call them party overflow. So the party overflow are basically allowed to step in any room that a party delegate can go in. They're also allowed to go in any room, anywhere they are allowed to go in, except they cannot speak or contribute. It's just to listen, like listen and learn. That is more of, to me, it's more of a nice thing, especially for the youth being given as a party delegate. You can learn so much from that as well. And then an observer, you're so much limited. You're limited, and it also depends like which kind of observer are you. Are you the UN observer? Are you a UN member state observer, or are you like which observer are you? It also they're like really limited. And I remember at COP I would see some observers who are really frustrated that they would really like to go into a certain room and do something, but they can't because their badge does not allow them to be in there. And for me, I was lucky and my badge would allow me to be anywhere and observe what was going on and see, though I couldn't contribute or say anything. It was just listening and learning. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, absolutely. So that was your experience, like, and what you got to do there. Like in terms of the what you observed, like, and it's brilliant, like that full access that you got, like, you were saying it was so nice to see so many Africans. Also, like, you were there as Tanzania's youth female kind of delegates, or kind of, sorry if I've got the wording wrong, like as part of the overflow party, so like representing, like, as the kind of female youth for Tanzania, which, by the way, is a massive honor. So congratulations. Like, it's so nice to see you recognized by your amazing country too. But yeah, so you got to see so much, and it was lovely to hear you saying at the beginning, reflecting on the positive side of your experience at COP27, that you my brain is not focusing. Yeah, that it was nice to see so many Africans and youth and kind of climate activists, and maybe you'd only met online. Like the split, like the kind of what you saw of the negotiation, like the negotiations, like, was that same balance there? So like, was there a good split and representation of youth and Africans at the negotiation table in the decision making? from what you observed there?
That that I can really tell you with the honesty that it deserves. We were having for the first time we had the youth pavilion, and what was really happening is that I cannot say it was fair, and it's something that I'm also like supposed to really raise to the youth of the United Nations Organization of Yongo and the UNFCCC, is that we had the youth pavilion. We had like so many Africans, but when it came to negotiation rooms, selecting young people to go to the negotiation rooms, it was more of a white privilege space. Like, okay, let's go, and we are having the youth representation, but really having Africans, typically or purely Africans, going in those negotiation rooms. That one I can say it with the honesty, with like 100%. Like it was something that was never really considered. It's just like as I told you, like okay, I stay in the US and I'm from the global south. I have a residence permit definitely to stay in the US, and you do not take me as a person who is representing the global south, because I do not understand what these people are going through. I understand what the US is going through because I stay in the US. And that was like kind of a frustration for like young people. And if there's other young people that are watching this, they would really support me on this. When it came to all these subjects and topics of discussion between young people or between youth, yes, we were really involved and really engaged. But when it came to it was being announced, like they need young people to go to blah blah blah, to go to the negotiation rooms. You never had any announcement about that. But when it came to activities, they would announce them and say, oh, we need young people to come and do this, we need young people to come. But when it came to negotiations, we never heard about that. And during the meetings and the conversations at the youth pavilion, they will tell you, oh, we are so happy we are having young people at the decision making rooms. I'm like, which kind of young people are those that are going to the decision making rooms? Because I haven't seen like any. And I remember I met like three ladies that were also really complaining and saying this decision making representation is more like a white privilege. Like, okay, I'm from the EU, then I'll get the privilege to go and on the decision making table. I'm from US, I'm from Canada, I'm from whichever part of the world I am, global north, and I can represent. So to me, I would say it was not fair, and it's something that next time the UNFCCC and the Yongo, they should look into and make sure that we have a fair representation of young people from the real global south, and not just picking people and saying blah 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 blah. That is not the right way to go, because I believe the United Nations it's an entity that is meant to be of equity and equality among people. And here we are talking about a generation that is it, we are I don't know how to put it, but they need to do something about it, and see that next time at COP28 we have a fair representation. We have young African people in the decision making rooms, in the negotiation rooms, because we were allowed, those with party overflow were allowed to go into the negotiation rooms but not make decisions. But those who had been chosen as to represent other young people would be able to contribute on the decisions that were being made. So it means if we do not have real people, like real people from the global south that are there on the tables, then we are going to get the wrong decision making processes with the wrong people, with the wrong information. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I would add to that, like by the next COP, if we want it to be meaningful, not only do we have fair representation and voices heard, but that we remove anybody from like corporate or fossil fuel backgrounds from that negotiation table. Like, why are they there? Like, they have a completely different interest at heart, and are the barriers. They are what have been preventing the kind of outcomes that we really want and expect and should be seeing from COP. So yeah, in addition to what you said, like it's really good, and thank you for being so honest about what you observed and saw. Like, yes, you were there, yes, there was spaces where your voice would be heard, but yeah, being the negotiations and that kind of decision making process really what wasn't inclusive and it wasn't equal, which is, you know, as you highlight, coming from the UN, which is all about like equality and human rights, which we'll get onto next. Like, yeah, it's a bit of a shame. Or it's more than a bit of a shame. It's um unacceptable, really, let's just say. Completely unacceptable. And yeah, like thank you for speaking out on it, because until more people are aware that that is the truth from COP and various other events like this, then you know, there's little that we can do to change it. But yeah, I'm all for like next year come COP28, like again, it's held in a place that's questionable in terms of human rights and climate and all sorts of things, but we'll get onto that next. But by COP28, let's actually have youth and African and most affected people's voices at the negotiation, at the decision making tables, and let's remove everyone from fossil fuel and corporate interest, because that is what is delaying action. So we kind of touched on a little bit about kind of, yeah, the human rights side of things there, and the, you know, we're all very much aware that there is no climate justice without social justice. And so it was interesting for COP27's host country to be Egypt, which is not particularly well known for being human rights advocates and adhering to human rights, let's say. How, as a start, before we get into the human rights and Egypt as a host country, the kind of nitty gritty of it, like what was your overall impression like of the time that you spent in Egypt? Yeah, of the country, like positives and negatives alike.
Wow. When you know, when it comes to human rights, it also it also depends with how the system has brought you up and how it has nurtured you. And looking at Egypt, I can say once again, and I will always tell people like I'm the luckiest. Like I'm just so lucky coming from Tanzania, and it's looking at how limited and how people do not have that kind of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and you know, every country has got its own political weaknesses and everything, but when it comes to human rights and human freedom, I do not honestly, I cannot say that Egypt has got that concept of saying they have human rights or they have freedom. And I remember like one person questioned me like, why do you guys bring COP27 to a country that does not even appreciate human rights and does not appreciate the human freedom? Why do you do that? And it's like, for me, it was more of like, let us create awareness and show Egypt that they need to give people, they need to give Egyptians freedom, they need to give them their rights and let them exercise their rights. And that I can say COP27 might or will contribute towards that. And because of the protests that were really going on against the human rights activities. And I remember I did one as well, a very large human rights COP that we are talking about. There's no climate justice without human rights, and no human rights without climate justice. And that was something that we really addressed at COP. And I remember there's this one Egyptian, I think is, I don't know if they've released her, is it her or him? I don't know if they've released her.
What was it?
And yeah,
Oh,
and
okay.
we even had the brother who came and spoke about it and begging and asking that he be released. But I don't know if something will be done about that. But it's something that even the international or the global teams really try to address and saying, you need to release people, you need to give people freedom. And you speak to the local people as well, they're like, they don't tell you much and they don't want to speak so much about their politics, about their leaders. They will just, everybody's just saying, oh, our president is so good, our president is so nice, he's, we are hosting COP27, blah blah blah. But when you look into their eyes, you see the fear, the terrifying thing in their eyes, and you just get to understand and know that these people are really suffering, and you can't just do anything from it. They can't speak. And I was like, maybe next time the UN is, it's also a peacekeeping entity, and if it's a peacekeeping entity and human rights, it should be able to address, like really address such issues in those countries. It has the power, it has it has the energy, and the I don't know what else it has, but it has it all to be able to address that. And if right now it's being able to talk about Ukraine and Russia, and because they are saying it, and we do not have to leave Egypt to see it for ourselves, and then we start talking about it. We have to, so because that is how it starts, by the way. That is how it slowly starts, and then it grows, and then it becomes something very, very bad and very, very difficult to handle. And and that is something that the UN should also try and solve the problem when it's still, they should try and do that peacekeeping at an early stage, rather than waiting until people are into chaos, people are fighting. That is when they want to step in and bring peace. That is not how I think it should be working. And and looking at Egypt and its people in general, is that the locals are just so, they just live this life that they are like, so long as I have food, I can eat, it's okay, everything will just, I leave everything to the government. So basically, they do not have a say. It's just the government that has a say. And I remember even doing the actions. Those the Egyptian, the locals were like were scared of doing the actions by themselves. So they will just come to us and say, okay, we have this idea, we want to do this action. Can you guys do it with us? And we will join them, because we understand, we really understand the fear from that comes out of being neglected, that freedom, being neglected your rights as a person. So we will join them and do the actions together, because that way they feel safe doing it with us rather than doing it on their own. And I can say that is something that was really terrifying for me as well. Though it was much safer for me as as an international delegate being in the country, I would just move around freely, because I felt like I'm being protected by the the UN government, the no sorry the UN security, and I was okay, like I'm good. But these people, they just walk in fear, like I should not do anything silly. I should not do anything stupid, because if I dare mess up, then that's it. But the others, they were okay. They were just moving around and having fun with others. But for them, they were having fun in fear. And and those who are even there, like the volunteers and everything, they were doing exactly what they have been told to do. You do not go against what you have been told to do as a volunteer from Egypt. And then another thing that really blew my mind is that before COP started, we had like these volunteers that were asked to apply, and this is something the majority of the people never talked about. People are asked to apply to be a volunteer or to volunteer at COP27, and really people applied, and we have like we have they had quite bad experiences, and people applied for that, and they went through a whole 3 to 4 months of training of what they will be doing at COP, how they'll be welcoming guests, who will be doing what. So they went through like a very vigorous training, and then they were told that they will be paying for their own air tickets, and then they will be given accommodation when they get there, and they will be refunded. So these people, by the way, the day came and they flew to Egypt, and only for them to get at the airport and then to receive emails being told that they have been rejected. They'll be using the Egyptian volunteers. So you can imagine, and this is something that nobody ever spoke about it. Nobody addressed it even at COP. I didn't hear anybody talking about it, but it was just a conversation between us as young people. And why did Egypt do that? They should at least have told them, like, before they could fly to Egypt, before them flying. And that shows you how this country does not just care. It just doesn't care. It's up to you to do wherever. It's not their problem. And that was like another thing that really triggered me, and I really wanted to know and understand Egypt. Like, why do they behave like that? We humans communicate. You should have communicated earlier to these people to make them understand that they are no longer being accepted as volunteers, so they do not have to fly, use their own money, use their own buy their own air tickets, and only to get to the airport and get emails that they have not been accepted, that they should you will use your locals and everything. And remember this, for like, they got stranded at the airports. They called their countries, their embassies, crying. And that is why I normally tell young people, whenever you're traveling, going to any country, make sure you inform your embassy. Let them know you are there. Make sure your government is aware that you're traveling out of the country. Even if you're going to do something for an organization or whatever, let them know that you are there for that organization, just in case of such situations. And it was really like quite of an experience that will tell you how Egypt doesn't care about, like, it's up to you. It's not their problem, it's your own problem. And not only that, you also talk to these taxi drivers, and nobody just really wants to go into deep conversations and talk to you about what is the real Egypt. And this triggered me, and I really wanted to see what is more of Egypt, what is more to Sham than what I said, what is more outside there apart from inside Sham, what is out there. And that is when I talked to my friends, and we decided to do what we call the climate justice climb, like climb for climate justice, climb for climate justice, CCJ. So the climb for climate justice was basically going to, you cannot talk about biodiversity, you cannot talk about droughts, you cannot talk about anything if you do not understand nature, if you do not understand biodiversity itself and the beauty of biodiversity. It doesn't matter which kind of biodiversity it is, or which kind of land or area it is. And that is why we decided to do Mount Sinai. And in the process of doing Mount Sinai, that is when we experienced and realized that these people are even more suffering than we see them at COP. You see, you look at the houses that they are staying in, you look at the life that they are leading out there, and you're like, this is terrible, this is horrifying. But when you get to Sham, everything looks like paradise. And when you get there, even the houses, I'm like, even in my own country, people do not stay in such houses, though it's a developing country, but people do not stay, like, do not live such a life. And that is like also another thing that really triggered me to really get to understand Egypt deeply. And if I could talk about Egypt, I will talk about Egypt like the whole day.
Oh, well, do you know what? Maybe we can create that opportunity because I felt the same. Like when you were telling me some of these things, like during COP, like I know, and first, I'm just so glad that you guys did get and take a day out from COP to go and do Mount Sinai. Like, yeah, that you just need that break during something as intense as COP, and to be able to connect with nature, which really was not possible in Sharm el Sheikh. Like from what I hear and understand. So I'm really so like glad and proud that you got out and did that and experienced something outside of Sharm el Sheikh and outside of what was presented to you as Egypt. But yeah, I was really interested to learn a little bit more about because you know what, actually, like we know like I was aware that Egypt doesn't have great like human rights history, but I didn't really know enough about it, and quite often it gets overshadowed by you know, human rights atrocities that are happening elsewhere. So like you mentioned Ukraine, and you know the everything with the Iran protests, you know, was ongoing. So like, you know, it almost is like what's happening in Ukraine and Iran is like trumping the issues of human rights in Egypt. But I have like a couple of friends here in Glasgow who are Egyptian, and ask them a bit more about the kind of the background, the history, like what are the human rights abuses that are happening in Egypt, and they described or explained that it is a dictatorship, and that essentially the Arab Spring, that there was like there's this false sense that the after the Arab Spring that they achieved like democracy and that things are better, but actually the current president of Egypt is the right hand man to the people, to the dictator that was being overthrown at the Arab Spring, and that those elections were rigged. And one of my friends from Egypt who was there at COP, and so she knows Egypt, she's Egyptian, right? And it was amazing to hear how they were warned before speaking on at a climate justice pavilion event, that you are Egyptian, so international law doesn't apply here. You need to be quite careful as to what you say. Maybe don't say some things, which is interesting. And again, as a young climate activist, like that's the most frustrating thing. Like, we're here doing Truthful Tuesday, like the fact that our voices are being silenced because people don't want to hear the truth, like, yeah, doesn't sit very well. And you were talking about taking a or just seeing like the fact that in Sharm el Sheikh, like if you didn't get out of Sharm el Sheikh, you didn't really see Egypt. Like it's a really kind of false perception of it. And even then, like there wasn't community, like you didn't see real Egyptian people. And when you did, they were, as you say, in the roles of like taxi drivers or hoteliers, and that they seemed to have the same response to questions that were asked. And as you said, like anyone that you would speak to would say, oh yeah, we love our government. And that's just not the truth. It comes from a place of fear. It comes from a place of like being threatened. And you really hit a nail on the head when you mentioned about like, the UN is about peacekeeping first and foremost. Like that's how the UN established, like the climate wasn't on the agenda when the UN was formed, let's face it. And so the fact that, like, yeah, as you say, their peacekeeping mission is the mission of the UN, and that they're not stepping in when, as you say, like you can see, and I'm so glad, like it's from all the work that you and I have done together, like you actually have more freedom, like, and capacity to do things within Tanzania than even in the UK. Like there is freedom of speech, but if you say things, it has consequences, or not at all. Like it's not like my life is at risk, but my ability to live and pay rent and stuff are very much affected on where you can get money from. And if funders don't want to hear you say something, then it's a form of silencing in itself as well. And as you say, it is a really slippery slope. And maybe in the new year we can have a conversation with, like, my our friends from Egypt around COP as well. It would be really good to kind of have that conversation, and like how you experienced COP in Egypt, like was that representative of Egypt? And like how I experienced COP in Glasgow, what elements were there, like for in Glasgow it was the togetherness. It was what happened on the inside was irrelevant. It was a letdown, it was disappointing, but what was really powerful and strong about COP26 in Glasgow was the people power, and that was suppressed by it being held in a country such as Egypt that doesn't have that freedom of speech, and it's not going to improve next year because next year is in Dubai. But yeah, anyway, that's the kind of human rights side of things. There was something else about Egypt being the host country that you touched upon that really took me by surprise. That I would love for us to include here in today's Truthful Tuesday. And that was like Sharm el Sheikh as a destination for a start, and you mentioned that it was originally actually going to be Alexandria, which has like the history, the culture, and stuff like this. But what really struck me when we were speaking before this was you were mentioning the fact that there are black and white Egyptians, and that they have very different mentalities, different responses to you as an African. And that actually, regardless of race, the Egyptians don't see themselves as African. They see themselves as part of the Middle East. And that's really interesting, like especially as this was heralded as the COP of Africa because it was held in Egypt. And I'm very aware from having studied like modern studies and development, international development, that so often we discuss like the Millennium Development Goals were divided, and it was sub-Saharan Africa. Poverty was discussed about sub-Saharan Africa. So there's clearly historically a kind of a split of how Africa is considered, and that the likes of Egypt, Libya, Syria, Morocco maybe aren't considered part of the African. I mean, geographically they're the African continent, but politically more Middle Eastern than African. And so really, like, was it right to herald this as the COP of Africa, when, let's face it, somewhere like South Africa, where you have like Nelson Mandela's legacy, where you have something like apartheid, like a complete abuse of human rights being overturned, there's surely, if there's concern of Africa's ability to host a COP, like you have that should not even come into question in the start. Like, I've been to Dar es Salaam. I know that you could host COP27 if given the opportunity. I would love you to be given the opportunity. So do you feel that it was right for this? I would love you to share more of what you shared with me about this. The Egyptians not considering themselves Africans and like seeing themselves very, very different to yourself and other African activists and delegates that attended. But do you feel that it was right for it to be heralded as the COP of Africa just because it was held in Egypt?
I can say, first of all, I'll not say I'm against COP27 being hosted in Egypt or in Africa, because for me, the world map geographically shows that Egypt is in Africa. But but it's just, as I said earlier, it's the systems that make us for who we are. It's the country that creates us for who we are, where we are born and where we have been raised from. And looking at Egypt, and as I said, we were like, it was 4 to 5 times you're just sitting around, and some Egyptian will come and say, "Oh, hi, Africans," and you're like, "Oh, Africa is here," and it's like, "Oh my goodness, you're also Africans, come on." And for me at first I thought maybe it was a joke that they were making, because we are fellow young people, they are our fellow youth. So I thought this is just a joke that we're just joking around with each other, because they look white and we look more like black. So I was like, we're just making fun of one another, until I also spoke to the local people, and they're like, "Oh, no, 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 Africa, Egypt is not Africa." And I'm like, "What? I didn't know about that." Unless my geography teacher lied to me, and also unless history lies to me, talking about Egypt being one of the greatest civilizations of Africa. And it was just like a weird experience when I was learning that from the people, because initially I thought the young people, my fellow youth, were just making like some jokes out of it and everything. And I also came to learn that there is a very big difference between a black Egyptian, like a mixed Egyptian, and a pure Egyptian. So with these other, I can call them white Egyptians, they were more friendly to us, and we were okay with them calling us Africans. Hi, Africans, blah blah blah. We were okay with them because they were our fellow young people, and we're just happy to be around and hang around as young people, and we were okay with that. But when it came to these other Egyptians, mixed Egyptians, or basically the black Egyptians, is that they just never wanted to interact with anybody. They were just on their own, and majority of them are the ones who are working on the streets, like watering the plants that had just been planted in the name of COP27 is coming to Sham. So they are the ones who are who are watering those plants and everything. So even if you would say hi to them and they wouldn't respond, you just they were just like no, like no goes on. I don't know, maybe they were told not to speak to us or something, but they just hated us, and you just see it. And but the others, the other people, the other Egyptians were so happy to see us. They were excited and they would talk to us, but them who are the same color as us never wanted to speak to us. And I really questioned myself, and I'm like, what is going on here? What am I not getting? And maybe if you get it, you'll let me know if you get it. It's just like they just they really just isolated themselves and just wanted to be on their own. And for me, calling it, it was nicknamed the COP of Africa, COP27, the COP of Africa, because it was happening in Africa, and I was really excited for the first time, despite all those things and whatever the myths, I call them the myths and misconceptions of Egyptians, saying they're not part of Africa. I was excited and happy it was hosted in Africa for the first time. And I remember there was one lady who asked me, like, why didn't you people take COP27 to DRC? And I was like, wow, I'm not the one who decides or selects an area and says we have to take COP27 to this particular country. And I don't understand the systems or the procedures or the regulations that they use to select a host country of COP. And that is how I responded to her, and she was like, wow, that is why I cannot waste my time going in there and just listening to you people with all the vacations that we are having here in Egypt and everything. But at least then why did you, if not maybe DRC, why did you not take it to Cairo? And I was like, you also have to look at the population of the area of the country and everything. Maybe that is how they looked at it and said, oh, we need a more peaceful place, quiet place than having it in the community. And honestly, I would say there was not so much of a community-based engagement, like the local community-based engagement in COP. Um, Compared to like other people, I can say even the youth, because I remember I went for the conference of youth before going for COP27, and even the youth that came for COP COI, the conference of youth, were not they were not from Sham. And majority of the people that we are really talking to, they said they do not, that they were not born there, they're not born in Sham, they're just in Sham because they are working. So it's not an area where like people are settling there or people live there. It was more of a touristic area with so much luxurious hotels, very nice hotels, great buildings and everything. So that was how Sham was. So majority of the people that stay there just stay there because they work there, and not that they have been born there, they have been raised there, their grandparents live there. No, it's more of a different story. It's as you said, it's a touristic destination, and it was just making COP feel like I don't know, but most people are having a feeling of like, this is a vacation, we just are having fun and everything, being in a quiet place all by ourselves and
Yeah.
everything.
And when you say about that quiet place and like, the discussion of, why was it not Cairo, or like, the skeptic in me really does say, especially if you were saying that it was due to be in Alexandria, because like Alexandria would be the perfect place. Like I don't know it. I haven't been personally, but you know, it's not a hustle bustle. Like it's very cultural. And you know, even in like, you know, Glasgow is a busy place. Like we still managed to find a location and have like a peaceful you know, and there's parts that you can find peace and to host COP. Like I think that you know, Sharm el Sheikh it's a holiday destination. The skeptic in me would say, you know, because it is such a holiday destination, there is not that sense of community, and there isn't the people. You know, we saw the Global Day of Action during COP26, like, you know, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people came out in the streets of Glasgow and across the world to kind of show solidarity with and demand you know, climate action. And so the skeptic in me says, you know, maybe that was a threat to power, and that they chose to have or move COP from Alexandria to Sharm el Sheikh, to because they saw the power of the people together. They saw the togetherness and empowerment of us all coming together in Glasgow. Didn't really like it, saw it as a threat to their power, and decided, like, you know, let's not have COP places where the people can come together, where there isn't that freedom. Like when you look at it being Sharm el Sheikh and then next year in Dubai, it's hard not to be a little skeptical about that decision making process, really. But steering away from, and we're kind of wrap up with just like the kind of the outcomes of COP, because yeah, we've spoken all about the kind of experience and you know, I think, you know, it's been well communicated that, you know, overall there's a disappointment in the outcomes. It's essentially the Glasgow Climate Pact rehashed. There really isn't much that has like there weren't too many wins really in terms of the negotiations. We didn't achieve kind of what we are hoping for, and like for me, one of the biggest disappointments, and we'll come on and end with a discussion on that 1.5 narrative. Like we'll come back to that to end. But in terms of and the loss and damages, like, you know, it's a win, but it's still, it's words, and it's not even, you know, people don't, there's not even a classification of uh of vulnerable. Like, you know, when they say loss and damages for vulnerable countries hasn't even been defined. And so, like, yes, there's a win in the fact that like loss and damages is being discussed and is included, but it's to be discussed in the future. Like there's no action happening. So in terms of like the outcomes in that regard, which was there anything from it positive that you can bring away from it? Like in the climate action space of COP27?
Mm-hmm. Really, it's very hard to tell right now. And as you said, it takes time. It takes like 6 months for you to really contemplate and know what happened and what has gone well and what has not gone well. And I would say it's really very hard to tell right now if what was promised can be fulfilled. Although we have people that like the EU that has already it's really taking lead in supporting the African face climate change. And when we talk about I think loss and damage, they're going to give out I think they've given it out, if I'm not mistaken. I have to follow up with the articles and see over 60 million euros for loss and damage. And but we are looking at all these other partners. What is their role? What have they done? Have they delivered as they promised? And having the loss and damage funding facility does not guarantee us the safety of the planet. What guarantees us the safety of the planet is where is this money going to come from? I don't know if you can hear that noise.
Yeah, is it a dog?
Sorry?
Is it a dog?
No, I don't know what, somebody's just hitting things out there. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So yeah, so sorry about that. So having the loss and damage funding facility does not guarantee us the safety of the planet, but it's all about what is the action for the planet? What do we do? And I can quote Antonio, the General Secretary of the United Nations. He said, this time round, this is a COP of implementation. It's either we take action together and solve the crisis together, or we die together. So after that, like, where are we now? Are we going to die together, or are we going to really solve the crisis together? And I can also quote like my president, Her Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan. She said, a country like Tanzania is a developing country that does not have enough resources, that does not have enough money to adapt, mitigate, and do all those things, and phase out to the renewable energies. But with all that we have done, it shows the world what we can do when we get money, when we get support, when we get funding. And it shows you how these developing countries are really trying to fight climate change on their own. And it's really high time for these the global north, or the G20 countries, as she puts it, to come out and really fulfill their promises. Because if they fulfill their promises, then we are going to improve the livelihoods of the people. We are going to improve the safety. We are going to promote the safety of the planet. And those are like some of the words of encouragement that I really garnered from there. And also knowing the fact that right now, as we are speaking, we cannot really tell exactly what is going on, because as you can tell, immediately after COP27, there was the World Cup. And it shows us how like people have been really busy. And after COP27, now we had COP15. So there have been like back to back conferences and meetings, and wherever that is happening. And so we cannot say right now that this is what was promised and this is what has been delivered, though it's something that we are also looking forward, and say maybe in the coming year, January, February, we will hear more about it and see what is going to happen. And talking about, for example, talking about the safety of water, let's see if what was promised at COP, or what was discussed about water at COP, is what is going to be delivered during the United Nations Water and Climate Conference. So it's more of like patience. To me, I think it deserves like more patience. Let's wait and see what if what was promised is going to be delivered. Let's wait and see if we are going to see any action about that. And also love the fact that majority of the countries are really trying to push these agendas. And I can give an example of my own country. Like the government has already started pushing the agenda. For instance, our president went on in her speech during COP27. She said Tanzania is really committed to preserve over 40 million hectares, which is over 55% of the Tanzanian land, and plant over 200 million trees in 3 years. Like in 3 years, in 3 years. Yeah, so that is something that really shows us how the government, like how serious the governments also are. And we are waiting for, of course, for delivery. Is it going to be delivered? Is it going to be implemented? And another thing that I really celebrate, and the person that I met and saw in person, and we had like a conversation of youth with him, is the European Vice President Franz Timmermans, and who is he was the European Green Deal Vice President, and he talks about we as young people, how we have been able to push all these agendas, and our voices have been able to be heard, and we are the ones that are really giving out like what are the kind of the solutions that we want. We are the ones with the minds that are giving out. And he talked about COP27 being a COP of implementation and not a revolutionary one. And really I'm seeing through him that he's really delivering through the like from the EU. They are really trying as much hard as they can to be able to fulfill what they have really promised. And that those are the kind of leaders that we would like to have, like honesty. Just be honest with the people and tell them we can deliver this or we cannot deliver this. So it's something that, as I said earlier, and I will repeat again, let's give it patience, let's give it time, though we do not have time, especially when it comes to the destruction of the planet. We do not have time for that. But let's give it the benefit of doubt and say, okay, let's wait and see what is going to happen next. But also let us push, because if we don't push, then it will just be like business as usual. And we have talked about it, and that's it. Let us also push as young people and say, you promised for the loss and damage funding facility. Where is the money coming from? Adaptation, biodiversity restoration. We need the money on the table to be able to, to implement all these, or to be able to adapt and mitigate.
Oh, absolutely. You tied like so much lovely together there. And you know what? As you say, it's that patience with active hope and action. Like we cannot just sit back and relax
Yeah.
and have this patience that these things will happen. Like they will not happen without us doing that work on the ground. And you know, like we, as I said to you, like, and we touched upon like the conversation with the moderate flank and kind of highlighted there that and we've discussed this a few times, like the just being present at and participating in COP27, like it was a distraction from the work that we do. Like, you know, I think from this Truthful Tuesday, like this reflection on COP27, there is no doubt that it was beneficial to be there. But it did stop us for like 5 or 6 weeks focusing on things like the climate education caravan. It's delayed certain things within our own grassroots work, which is that, you know, that is the action that needs to be happening in order for us to like, you know, and we continue it, right? And hopefully, you know, you and I, we have a plan for the new year that through the climate change education caravan, we can get to COP28 and show not even just like discussions of it, we can show how it works to implement the loss and damages funding through some of the stuff that we are doing with the climate change education caravan. So like hopefully, yeah, people can have a look on our website at the Trees for Birthdays and see what we're planning to do with the climate change education caravan. Just a wee shout out the fact that we do have the crowdfunder with matched funding. So like we cannot, Shamim and I cannot do this work without your support. And we have a crowdfunder at the moment that is part of the Back the Future Glasgow Climate Challenge. And everything that is donated will be doubled. So yeah, if you want to help us be able to, it's the COP of implementation. If you want to help us, you know, the UN is not helping us, like our governments are not helping us. There is no funding for the work that we are doing, which is the big, you know, atrocity here. But if you like what we are delivering, if you like this idea that, you know, we could, if given that opportunity, if given that capacity to implement, we can show by COP28 how loss and damages can be implemented in a way that is scalable and everything. Like, you know, we are really excited to show you what we can be doing. So yeah, absolutely, that patience with the active hope and action. So you're right, we cannot say right now whether, you know, COP27 delivered. There we need to give it time, and as you say, we went straight from that to the World Cup, and we now have the COP15 biodiversity. And we'll come back on another video with our what we have seen from COP15. But one of the things, going back to just as we finish, because we will in the new year, we will have a conversation and invite you to a conversation on, you know, a kind of few months down the line, or a couple of months later, a reflection on not just COP27 but COP26 and the COP process in general. We will be doing that with the moderate flank, hopefully. And yeah, like that kind of a discussion around is COP needed? Like I left climate science in part, one of the things was being involved in the IPCC report, like being a reviewer on the IPCC reports, and like being frustrated because we started a movement that is like, we do not need another IPCC report, we need action. And in the same way, like hopefully this conversation that we have with yourself and with Dana, and hopefully with through the moderate flank, we can kind of start to look at, like, is COP effective? Like, do we need COP, or is it distracting us from the grassroots work that we are doing? Can we have maybe, we'll come on to the ideas of going forward, like, if we are upcycling the COP process. But bringing it back to Antonio Guterres, and he's saying about coming together or we die together. Like, one of the things that really struck me, and we can end this kind of Truthful Tuesday on this, is the fact that, at the Paris Agreement, at COP21, the Paris Agreement was signed, and it was to keep global warming within 1.5 degrees. And so that was 2015. So we are now like 6-7 years on. And just before COP27, there was the scientific paper, the article saying that there is no current viable pathway in which we can keep to 1.5. And so essentially, like, this 1.5 narrative that we as activists, that we as scientists, that we as change makers, raising awareness, like 1.5 was so much of our hope. Like, that was what we promised ourselves. And so, like, 1.5, it didn't even make the mainstream media enough. And I was really surprised to see that, this COP of implementation didn't really cover the fact that we have failed. We are currently failing. We are not on track to keep global warming within 1.5 degrees. So surely does that not throw in to question the whole COP process? If 7 years ago we said, 7 years ago we could have taken the action and stayed within 1.5 degrees. Me, as the ever optimist, I would say that 1.5 narrative is not dead. There is one part that people seem to like it, we don't speak about it enough, is that, like, the 1.5, this is based on business as usual. Like, I think we could, like, or we talk about all of these irreversible tipping points and damages having been done, that it's irreversible. It's irreversible in the way that in the box and the silo that we study it right now. But science doesn't yet account for fully if we were to take action to remedy. Like, we have knowledge, we have understanding, we absolutely can still come together. We might surpass 1.5, but we can at least make sure that that is not indefinite, that we can bring it right back, and take all the necessary measures. And so, yeah, that 1.5 narrative, like, to me, it was really frustrating that for the last 7 years, that has been our hope, it has been our goal, and it has been our narrative. It's been, and for it to just, the fact that it was just before COP27, that really there was, multiple different evidence coming into place that, we are not on track, we are failing to keep 1.5 alive. And yet it just disappeared in COP27. Like, if it was COP of implementation, surely it should be implementing everything that we can to keep 1.5. That came from COP21. That was, the Paris Agreement is perhaps one of the biggest outcomes of a COP. And yet, yeah, it just kind of was almost, it was almost, by ignoring it, by it not being angrily spoken about, not being included in the negotiations in that final articles from COP27, that it's almost like we've just accepted, that 1.5 is gone. And that's just not okay, in my opinion. I don't know how you feel, but to Antonio Guterres, I mean, at the moment, we're on track to die together. So as the head of the UN peacekeeping, we can absolutely bring back 1.5. We should absolutely work towards 1.5 and really, let's stop all these empty words and turn them into action. And as we say, if nothing else, Shamim, you and I will be starting the new year by doing exactly that. We'll go into 2023 strong and implement everything that we have put in place this year. And I know that there are hundreds upon thousands of other amazing, strong activists and climate campaigners and grassroots people like you and I that are doing this all around the globe. And that, you know what, if the UN isn't going to implement, we'll implement and prove and show them, even if it is made incredibly, incredibly difficult, because we're not supported to do this work. So yeah, if you're watching this and like what you hear and feel that we can do more for implementation and climate action than some of these big charities and the UN that you might have been giving money to for years, if not decades, please do consider making a pledge to our crowdfunder, especially as it's being doubled. It's only a small step of what Shamim and I need to achieve in order to keep doing this work and be able to survive. But yeah, Shamim, I want to give this was your COP27 reflections. You and I at least are keeping 1.5 alive in our work and action. You and I are not able to determine how the rest of the world kind of behaves, but at least we're keeping it alive. What would your final reflections on COP as we kind of end 22 and go into 2023? COP27 is been and gone. And the best thing we can do is look forward, as you say, with patience and active hope with action. But yeah, I'll let you wrap it up.
I would say I'll repeat the same words, like let's be patient and actively engage in these things and play your part, because if you play your part, the planet will also play its part, and play your part in your own country, because that is how you'll be helping your country combat climate change, and that is how you'll be helping your local communities, your fellow young people curb and come together to combat climate change, because climate change is real and it's happening, and we just forget and we're like, just business as usual. But those of us who see it in our countries that we come from, that should be a motivation enough for you to play your part, to take action, and together let's combat climate change.
Yay! Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in, guys, and listening. This was only meant to be 20 minutes. Like, we were trying to do a 20-minute COP27 reflection, but there is just far too much to throw in. There's too much to unpack. And as we say, in the new year, we're going to be doing a kind of online event talking about COP26, COP27 with Shamim, myself, and Dana, our friend from Egypt, who was also at COP27. And so that'll be a really nice perspective to kind of bring all three of us like chatting about our experiences of COP, comparing COP26 to COP27, and what we really think can be done going forward in the COP space. So thank you for listening this long. I hope that you have found, yeah, some peace in everything that we have shared. Thank you, Shamim, for sharing your reflections on COP. Thank you for being there. Like, thank you for being, as we said, it was an absolute honor and a privilege for you to be Tanzania's female youth representative, both at Conference of the Youth and COP. Thank you, and thank you for giving your time, your energy, your emotion to it all. Because yeah, I absolutely just admire it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you all for listening. Goodbye.